Turkey's Bursa Istanbul plans to reopen today. This is after being suspended last week after the deadly earthquakes. Now, sources tell Bloomberg that the government is injecting billions of dollars to prop up stocks before the open. Simone Foxman is tracking this story. Simone, what's been done to prepare the market for this reopen?
Well, first of all, it does seem that the decision has been made to actually reopen the stock market. That was something that officials considered not doing briefly earlier this week. But instead, we have this sort of kitchen sink worth of measures. First, we'll see the sovereign wealth fund backed by state lenders potentially able to come in and buy stocks to kind of limit the volatility. Also see a temporary revocation of a 15% tax that companies normally have to pay when they go and buy back their shares. So that should encourage more companies to go in and buy back their shares in the near term. Also, we understand that pension funds that receive government dollars in terms of matching, that contribution that they match and currently amounts to about $2.7 billion, they're going to be forced to use that to go in and buy stocks. So that could also increase the amount of money that we see flooding into the market immediately. And what we've seen as well is some of these state-linked corporates increasing their buyback programs over the last couple of days, sort of in conjunction with the potential rollout of these measures that sources have been telling us about. We've seen the reaction in some of the ETFs that are still trading, namely in the UK and the US, the iShares MSCI indices up 6.5%, 8+% yesterday on some of these measures, and the news that the Bursa Istanbul will likely reopen. But all of these things, economists and investors warn, are likely to be limited. They're meant to stem the tide of what's happened, not necessarily reverse course for what was the worst performing stock index around the world even before this tragedy.
And the IMF, Kristalina Georgieva, I should say, she was here in Dubai at the World Government Summit. She was talking through a whole host of issues, but of course a lot of it was around the aid packages, and one of those countries that she talked about was Tunisia. Can you put that in context for me around everything else that she said?
Yeah, this one is particularly important because it's a bit market moving. A lot of people have been very concerned that Tunisia is really on the brink of default, and the saving grace for the country could be a $1.9 billion four-year program with the IMF for aid that would allow Tunisia to kind of move forward, receive money from other countries. Now, it's been very challenging for Tunisian government to actually implement the reforms needed to get this aid, and President Kais Saied, in addition to being beleaguered with various political problems, he's at war with the unions, essentially. He has not wanted to impose the policies that the IMF wanted. But Kristalina Georgieva saying yesterday that she expects that the things that need to be done in order to achieve this program could happen in the next weeks, not months. That said, there's a lot of concern about this program. There's a lot of concern about Tunisia's fiscal health. And if you check out what happened in the CDS markets yesterday, investors not necessarily convinced. Risk remains extremely elevated for default. Tunisia clearly already in distressed territory, Manus.
Yeah, having a very tough time. And then if we just have a quick chat about the Chinese leader, Xi Jinping, pledging to deepen his ties with Tehran. This is after a meeting with the president there, Ibrahim Raisi, in Beijing. I mean, what were the tangible things that came out of that meeting?
You know, frankly, Manus, tangible? Not that much. We saw pledges by Beijing to support Iran. We saw Xi talk about desire to move forward with the JCPOA negotiations, the 2015 nuclear deal, talks of which essentially fallen apart over the past year or so. But in reality, the most tangible thing seems to be the disappointment that Iranians feel about the lack of Chinese investment and the lack of Chinese engagement, even after a massive 25-year cooperation deal was signed back in 2021. We got some pretty negative comments out of Ibrahim Raisi, the Iranian president, before he went to Beijing, the first visit by the president of Iran in 5 years. And we should note, frankly, a lot of scholars just don't believe that we are likely to see China truly deepen its ties with Iran because it doesn't want to flout U.S. sanctions, neither companies nor the government. There's also a lot of concern from Iran's side about whether or not China will continue purchasing so much of Iranian crude. That was a topic of discussion, particularly since China appears to be turning increasingly to Russia to buy crude supplies.